Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to believe that love meant patience. That if you held on long enough, if you weathered the storms, eventually the person you loved would see you, appreciate you. I thought that's what Jessica and I had, something solid, something worth fighting for. But I was wrong. At first, it was little things. A sigh when I asked her how her day was. An eye roll when I made a joke. Comments about how I never understood how busy she was, or how I just didn't get how much work went into planning an event. I had always supported her, always made sure she had what she needed. If she had a big event coming up, I took care of everything at home, so she wouldn't have to worry. I told myself she was just stressed, that things would go back to normal once the baby shower for her best friend was over. But things never went back to normal. The worst part wasn't even how she treated me when we were alone. It was how she made sure everyone else saw me the same way she did. It was at a small gathering with her friends, just a casual dinner at Tyler and his wife's house. We had all been drinking, laughing, talking about old stories. Jessica had been in rare form that night, glowing under the attention, the center of everything. And then, out of nowhere, she turned to me with that smirk I had grown to hate. "You know what's funny?" she said, swirling her wine. "Matt thinks he could build our dream house by himself." I frowned, caught off guard. "I never said that." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You always talk about how you'd do things differently if it were your project. How you'd make it right instead of hiring someone." Tyler chuckled. "Hey man, I get it. Gotta have pride in your work." Jessica laughed. "Oh no, it's not pride. It's pure stubbornness. He still thinks craftsmanship matters. Like, no offense, babe, but no one's paying extra for real wood cabinets anymore." The table laughed, and my stomach tightened. I forced a smile, but something inside me cracked. It wasn't the first time she had made me the joke, but something about the way she said it, in front of them, made it different. I glanced at Tyler. He was looking at Jessica, his expression unreadable. But there was something there, something I didn't like. I should have said something then. Should have told her that she didn't get to tear me down just to make herself look better. But I didn't. Instead, I took another sip of my drink, swallowing the words that wanted to escape. But I knew, right then and there, something had to change. I didn't sleep well after that dinner. I kept replaying the way Jessica had laughed at me, the way Tyler had looked at her. There was something about it I couldn't shake, like an itch just beneath my skin. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She hummed to herself as she made coffee, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging me as I walked into the kitchen. "Busy day today?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She barely looked up. "Yeah, still so much to do for the baby shower. I'll probably be at Ashley's all afternoon." I nodded slowly, watching her. "You've been spending a lot of time over there." She shrugged. "Yeah, well, Ashley's got a lot on her plate. I'm trying to take some of the stress off her." I leaned against the counter, studying her. "That's nice of you." She glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "Why you say it like that?" I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral. "No reason. Just noticing." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, maybe you should notice how much I do for other people instead of questioning it." And just like that, the conversation was over. She turned back to her phone, dismissing me like I wasn't worth another second of her time. I exhaled, forcing myself to let it go. But I didn't. The thought nagged at me all day while I worked. I was good with my hands, always had been. There was something satisfying about taking raw materials and shaping them into something solid, something lasting. It was a kind of control I didn't have in my marriage. Jessica had a way of making me feel like I was just part of the scenery, something that existed in the background of her life. But now, for the first time, I was starting to see things clearly. When she came home that evening, she was in a good mood. Too good. She floated through the kitchen, texting someone, smirking at whatever was on her screen. I watched her from the dining table, setting my beer down slowly. "How was Ashley's?" She glanced up, distracted. "Oh, same. Just lots of decorating, lots of running around." I nodded, taking a sip of my beer. "That's funny. Ashley texted me earlier saying she was exhausted and slept most of the afternoon." Jessica froze. It was only for a split second, but I caught it. The way her grip on her phone tightened. The way her shoulders tensed before she forced a laugh. "Well, Yeah, she needed the rest. I just kept working while she napped. I tilted my head. 4 hours? She frowned, crossing her arms. Why are you suddenly so interested in my schedule? I shrugged. Just curious. She rolled her eyes. Matt, if you don't trust me, just say it. I held her gaze for a long moment before shaking my head. Never said that. She let out a sharp breath, then turned and walked out of the kitchen, muttering under her breath. But I saw it. The crack. The tiny fracture in her confidence. I didn't push it. I let her believe she had won that round, let her think I had backed down. But that night, when she was asleep, I made my move. I found her purse on the dresser, right where she always left it. I opened it carefully, my hand steady as I reached inside and placed the small voice recorder at the bottom. A simple device, something small enough that she'd never notice. By the time I crawled back into bed, my heart was steady. Tomorrow, I would have my answers. Jessica left the house the next morning like she always did, without a second thought about me. She kissed me on the cheek, barely making eye contact, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door with her usual, "Don't wait up if I'm late." I waited exactly 5 minutes after I heard her car pull out of the driveway before I went to our bedroom and retrieved the voice recorder. My hands were steady as I pulled it from the bottom of her purse, tucked neatly beneath her wallet and a pack of gum. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny device in my palm. I had spent the last 12 hours trying to convince myself that I was overthinking things, that I was making a mistake. Maybe she really had been helping Ashley. Maybe I had let my frustration and humiliation cloud my judgment. Maybe the woman I had promised my life to wasn't capable of betraying me like that. But deep down, I already knew. I pressed play. For the first 20 minutes, all I heard was the sound of Jessica moving around, drawers opening and closing, the occasional rustling of decorations. Then, a door creaked. A pause. The sound of footsteps. And then his voice. "Tyler." My grip tightened around the recorder as I listened, my stomach twisting with every passing second. Did she fall asleep? Jessica's voice, hushed but filled with a breathy excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Out like a light," Tyler replied, followed by the sound of a door clicking shut. A muffled giggle. More movement. A soft moan. I shut it off. My ears rang, my vision tunneling in as I stared at the blank wall ahead of me. My body felt disconnected, weightless, like I was floating outside of myself. Watching another man sit on this bed, in this room, listening to undeniable proof that his wife had been sleeping with his best friend's wife's husband. The irony burned. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed Ashley, her best friend, a woman who was carrying Tyler's child, a woman who had trusted Jessica enough to let her into their home, into their lives. And Tyler? I had known him for years. We weren't best friends, but we had been close enough that I had trusted him, let him around my family, shook his hand without realizing it was the same one touching my wife behind my back. My breathing slowed, the initial shock giving way to something colder. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated, planned. They had been doing this right under our noses, using Ashley's pregnancy as the perfect cover. Jessica had been making me a fool in front of everyone, and I had been too blind to see it. Until now. I stood up, placing the recorder carefully on the nightstand. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling slowly. I had options. I could confront her the moment she walked through the door, demand an explanation, watch her scramble for lies. I could go to Tyler's house right now, knock on his door, see the smug look disappear the second he realized I knew. But that wouldn't be enough. Jessica had spent years humiliating me in front of others. It wasn't just about what she did behind my back. It was about the way she had made me feel small, weak, like I wasn't worth her respect. I wasn't going to let this end in a screaming match behind closed doors. No, if Jessica wanted an audience, she was going to get one. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages until I found the one from Ashley. She had sent it 2 days ago, a simple, excited text about the baby shower. "Can't wait for Saturday. Thanks for all your help." Saturday. The perfect opportunity. I typed out a response. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a day no one forgets. I set my phone down and looked at the voice recorder one more time. Jessica had no idea what was coming, but soon she would. I spent the next few days preparing, not in a frantic, desperate way, but with a calm, methodical precision that surprised even me. I wasn't just exposing Jessica, I was dismantling the life she thought she had full control over. Every sneaky text, every whispered excuse, every smirk she had thrown my way when she thought she was getting away with it, all of it was leading to this moment. The baby shower was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Ashley had been planning it for weeks, leaning on Jessica for help. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica had spent hours at Tyler's house decorating, when in reality, she had been sneaking off to the guest house, betraying the very woman she was pretending to celebrate. By Friday night, she was giddy, her energy electric as she flitted around the house, checking decorations she had brought home, making last-minute adjustments to her speech. "It's going to be perfect," she mused, sipping a glass of wine. "Ashley is going to love it." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my beer. "I'm sure she will." Jessica beamed. "And just wait until you hear my toast. I've been working on it all week. It's all about family, loyalty, the strength of friendship." I nearly choked on my drink, but covered it with a cough. Sounds fitting. She didn't notice the way I said it. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, likely texting Tyler, finalizing whatever little rendezvous they had planned for the next day. I watched her for a moment, taking in every little detail, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she smiled at her screen, the way she looked so at peace, so completely unaware of what was coming. Good. The next morning, Jessica left early to help set up. I let her go without a word, waiting exactly 30 minutes before heading to my truck. I had a final stop to make before the party. The electronics store was nearly empty when I walked in. I found exactly what I needed in under 5 minutes. A Bluetooth speaker with crisp audio and a long-range connection. The guy at the counter rang it up without a second glance. To him, I was just another husband picking up a last-minute gadget. By the time I arrived at Ashley and Tyler's house, the guests were already trickling in. Friends, family, people smiling and laughing, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I spotted Jessica near the refreshment table, holding a glass of lemonade, laughing at something Tyler said. She looked so comfortable, so at home. I gripped the speaker in my hand and took a deep breath. Not for long. Ashley waddled toward me, her round belly leading the way, her face lighting up. "Matt, you made it." I smiled, hugging her gently. "Wouldn't miss it." She glanced at the small box in my hand. "What's that?" I smiled. "Something special for later." She didn't question it, just grinned before getting pulled away by another guest. I moved quickly, setting the speaker on a side table near the back of the room. It was small, barely noticeable among the decorations. With my phone in my pocket, I tested the connection. Perfect. The voice recording was queued up and ready to go. All I had to do was wait. It didn't take long. After the cake was cut and the gifts were unwrapped, Jessica stood, tapping her glass with a spoon. The room quieted. All eyes turned to her. She smiled, looking around at the crowd. I just wanted to take a moment to say a few words. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Jessica cleared her throat. "Ashley, you are one of the most incredible women I know. You are strong, kind, and you deserve nothing but happiness. This baby is so lucky to have you as a mother. And Tyler, well, you better be ready to step up because she's going to run circles around you." Laughter. Jessica smiled wider, soaking it in. "But beyond that, I just want to talk about something important, loyalty." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Jessica continued, her voice warm and steady. "Loyalty is what makes friendships and marriages strong. Loyalty is what makes friendships and marriages strong. It's what separates real relationships from the ones that fall apart." Jessica's voice rang clear, confident, filled with that effortless charm she always had in front of a crowd. People nodded along, smiling, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She had no idea that she was walking straight into a disaster of her own making. I slid my hand into my pocket, fingers brushing against my phone. The Bluetooth connection was solid. The file was queued up. All it took was one tap. Jessica lifted her glass, her expression glowing with self-satisfaction. "So here's to love, to family, and most importantly, to trust." I pressed play. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the speaker I had placed near the back of the room crackled to life. The noise cut through the quiet like a blade. At first, it was just rustling, the sound of movement. A door clicking shut. A faint chuckle. Then came the voices. Jessica's voice, breathless, teasing. Did she fall asleep? Tyler's response, low and amused. I like a light. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Heads turned toward the speaker, brows furrowed. Jessica froze, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. Wait, she started, but it was too late. The recording continued, and this time there was no mistaking it. Jessica's giggle, the rustling of sheets. Tyler's voice, a low murmur. A sharp inhale. Then, clear as day, Jessica's whispered, "We shouldn't be doing this." The sound of their betrayal filled the air, playing over the speaker for every guest to hear. For Ashley to hear. A heavy silence swallowed the room. Ashley let out a choked gasp, her hands flying to her stomach as if she had been physically struck. Tyler, who had been standing near the cake table, went rigid, his face draining of color. A murmur of shock rolled through the guests, whispers turning into horrified exclamations. Jessica's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. "Matt," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. I pushed off the wall, stepping forward casually. "Oh, don't stop now, Jess," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You were just talking about loyalty." She shook her head wildly, her chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. "You don't understand." "No," I interrupted, my voice cold. "I understand perfectly." I turned my gaze toward Tyler, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "And so does Ashley." Ashley swayed slightly, her breath ragged. Her mother rushed to her side, gripping her arm as she struggled to stay upright. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Jessica took a desperate step toward her. "Ashley, please, I can explain." Ashley flinched away from her as if burned. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't you dare." Tears welled in her eyes, and then she turned on Tyler. "You told me you loved me," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury and heartbreak. "You promised me." Tyler swallowed hard, but no words came out. There was no excuse for this. No way to twist the story into something that didn't make him look like the worst kind of man. Jessica turned back to me, eyes pleading now. "Matt, we can talk about this." I laughed, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to talk about. I just figured the guests should know what's really been happening here." The weight of what I had done settled over the room, the sheer finality of it pressing down on Jessica and Tyler like a suffocating force. There was no recovering from this, no sweeping it under the rug. Jessica's lips trembled, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression: fear. "Matt," she whispered, "please." I stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. I hope it was worth it. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her standing in the ruins of everything she had destroyed. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the house. The weight that had sat on my chest for months, maybe years, was gone. The betrayal was still there, the anger simmering beneath my skin, but something else had settled in its place. Freedom. I got in my truck and started the engine, gripping the wheel as I took a slow, measured breath. The murmur of chaos still echoed from inside the house. I imagined Jessica scrambling, trying to explain herself to the crowd, to Ashley, to anyone who would still listen. But there was no talking her way out of this. The recording had done its job. I had done my job. I should have felt satisfied, victorious even, and in some ways I did. But the truth was, the damage didn't stop with Jessica and Tyler. The wreckage had spread. Ashley was inside that house, her world shattered. Guests who had come to celebrate a new life had instead witnessed the end of 2 marriages. The betrayal had poisoned everything, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I pulled out of the driveway, driving without a destination, just letting the road carry me away from the mess. I didn't go home. I didn't want to be in the house I had shared with Jessica, surrounded by the memories of a life that had been a lie. So I parked at a quiet overlook just outside of town, the kind of place I used to go when I needed to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. I sat there for a while, staring at the horizon, letting it all sink in. My marriage was over. I had spent so long holding onto something that had been rotting from the inside out. I had let Jessica's words, her constant belittling, make me feel like I wasn't enough. But I was enough. I had always been enough. She was the one who had fallen short. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, half expecting it to be Jessica, but it wasn't. It was Ashley. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was raw, broken. "Matt." I swallowed. "Are you okay?" A bitter laugh. "No, not even close." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the headrest. "I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" she said, voice sharp with disbelief. "You're the only one who's been honest with me. You're the only reason I know the truth." She exhaled, shaky. I don't know what to do. I didn't have an answer for that. "You don't have to figure it all out right now." Silence stretched between us. "Where are you?" she asked. I hesitated, just clearing my head. Another pause. Then, quietly, "Can I come?" I turned my head, looking out over the darkening sky. It would have been easy to say yes. Maybe part of me wanted to, but she wasn't asking for me. She was asking for an escape. And I knew better than anyone that running from the pain didn't make it disappear. "You need to be with your family right now," I said gently. She sniffed. "Yeah." More silence. "Thank you, Matt," she whispered. "For everything." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Take care of yourself, Ashley." I ended the call and set my phone down, staring out the horizon for a long time. Then I started the truck and drove home. Jessica was waiting for me. She was sitting on the porch steps, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale in the glow of the porch light. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. I killed the engine, but didn't get out right away. She stood up slowly as I stepped out of the truck, her eyes scanning my face, searching for something. Mercy, maybe. "Matt," she started, her voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I walked past her, up the steps, and unlocked the door. "There's nothing left to say." She grabbed my arm before I could go inside. "Please," she choked out. Her voice broke, and for a split second, she looked like a stranger. A scared, desperate woman who had just realized she had lost everything. I looked down at her hand on my arm. "Let go, Jessica." She hesitated, then slowly pulled away, her fingers trembling. "Do you hate me?" she whispered. I let out a slow breath. "No, but I don't love you either." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know what to do." "Figure it out," I said, stepping inside. Like I had to. Then I shut the door. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Jessica didn't come inside that night. I heard her sitting on the porch for a long time, shifting every so often, the occasional muffled sob breaking the silence. I didn't feel bad for her. Maybe once I would have. Maybe if this had happened years ago, if she had come to me with guilt instead of getting caught, if she had ever shown a shred of respect for our marriage, I might have given her a second chance. But not now. Not after the years of belittling, the sneaking around, the way she had laughed in my face while lying straight to it. Not after hearing her voice on that recording, whispering to Tyler in the same tone she used to use with me. By the time I woke up the next morning, she was gone. I didn't wonder where she went. It didn't matter. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I wasn't dragging this out. Jessica had lost the right to any negotiation the moment she chose to betray me. Rachel, my attorney, was sharp and efficient. "You have everything you need to make this a clean break," she told me as I sat across from her in her office. "The recording, the financial records, and the fact that you weren't the one unfaithful, that puts you in a strong position." I nodded. I want it over as soon as possible. She studied me for a moment. "No hesitation?" "None." "Good," she said, pulling out a folder. "Then let's get started." The next few days were a blur of paperwork and legal meetings. Jessica didn't fight back at first. She didn't call, didn't text. It was almost eerie how quiet she was. Then, the messages started. "Matt, please. Can we just talk? I know I messed up, but do we have to go straight to divorce? I lost everything. Don't take this from me, too." I didn't respond. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she had to face the consequences. Then came the anger. "You're really just going to throw everything away? After all these years? You're not innocent either, Matt. You were always distant, always making me feel like I wasn't enough. You're pathetic." You needed to humiliate me instead of just handling this privately? Shows what kind of man you are. I laughed when I read that one. The same woman who had spent years making jokes at my expense, tearing me down in front of our friends, was now angry that she had been publicly embarrassed. Karma had a sense of humor. By the time we had our first official divorce meeting, Jessica had dropped the pleading act and moved on to bargaining. She walked into the room looking like a woman who hadn't slept in days. The confidence was gone. The arrogance that once laced every word she spoke had crumbled. She sat across from me, her lawyer beside her, and for the first time in years, she didn't look at me like I was beneath her. Rachel started laying out the terms. The house? Mine. No alimony. No financial compensation. Jessica was walking away with nothing but the clothes she packed. Her lawyer, a stiff-looking man in a suit that was probably worth more than my truck, shifted uncomfortably. These terms are aggressive. Rachel smiled. Given the circumstances, they're generous. Jessica swallowed, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Matt. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. This doesn't have to be so final. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Yes, it does. Her throat bobbed as she struggled to keep her composure. I don't know what to do without you. I tilted my head. You should have thought about that before you threw me away. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Jessica, we should discuss. I'll sign, she blurted out. The room went silent. Her lawyer turned to her, startled. Jessica, I'll sign, she repeated, voice hollow. Just give me a minute. She stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. I didn't follow. Rachel glanced at me. Do you think she'll go through with it? I nodded. She doesn't have a choice. When Jessica came back, her face was blotchy, her eyes red. She sat down, picked up the pen with shaky fingers, and signed her name on the dotted line. And just like that, it was over. She didn't look at me as she left. I didn't watch her go. The day the divorce was finalized, I woke up feeling different. Lighter, maybe, like I had stepped out of a fog I didn't even realize I had been living in. The papers were signed, the house was mine, and Jessica was no longer my problem. She had officially moved out 2 days ago. I hadn't been there when she did it. I had made sure of that. I didn't need to watch her pack up the remnants of her life. Didn't need to hear her final attempts at justifying what she had done. When I came home that evening, the house was emptier. She had taken a few things. The framed pictures from our wedding, some of the furniture she had picked out, little trinkets that meant nothing to me. But most of it had been left behind, like even she couldn't bring herself to take memories of a life she had destroyed. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the half-empty shelves, the space where her favorite chair used to be, and I expected to feel something. I didn't. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle deep in my chest. This was my home now. No more walking on eggshells, no more waiting for the next backhanded insult. No more pretending everything was fine while she lied to my face. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, walked out onto the back porch, and watched the sun dip below the trees. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. The next few weeks were spent rebuilding, not just the house, but my life. I threw myself into work, taking on more carpentry projects, spending long hours in the workshop, letting my hands and mind stay busy. I met up with old friends I hadn't seen in years, went to barbecues without worrying if Jessica was going to make some offhand comment that would embarrass me. People looked at me differently now, some with pity, others with curiosity. But there were a few, especially the guys who had been in my position before, who looked at me with something else. Respect. Like they knew what it took to walk away, to take back control of your life when someone had spent years making you feel like you weren't enough. One evening, I was at the hardware store picking up supplies when I ran into Ashley. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her, still tired, still carrying the weight of everything Tyler had done to her. But there was a fire in her eyes now, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, Matt. I nodded. Hey, Ashley. We stood there for a moment, an awkward silence stretching between us. Then she sighed. I just want to say thank you for telling me the truth, for not letting me sit there and be humiliated while everyone else knew. I studied her for a moment, then shrugged. You deserve to know. She nodded, swallowing. Yeah, I did. Another pause. Then, hesitantly, she asked, how are you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. And then I smiled. I'm good. Her lips quirked up slightly. Me too. We didn't say much else. Just exchanged a knowing look. Two people who had been burned, who had walked through the fire, and were still standing. As I walked back to my truck, I realized something. Jessica had spent years making me feel small, making me believe that I wasn't enough, that I had nothing without her. But she was wrong. I had my work, my friends, my freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I had myself. And that was more than enough. I hadn't thought much about Jessica after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't that I didn't care about what happened to her. It was that I had spent so many years wrapped up in her moods, her opinions, her expectations, that I refused to let her take up space in my head any longer. I had wasted enough time on a woman who never truly valued me. But karma has a way of catching up to people. I was at a job site one afternoon, putting the finishing touches on a custom-built staircase when I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a client or one of the guys from my crew, but instead, I saw a name I hadn't thought about in weeks. Jessica. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. I could have ignored it, let her voice go unheard the way she had ignored me for so many years. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered, "Yeah." There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. "Matt." Her voice was different, lighter, almost fragile. I leaned against the railing, wiping my hands on my jeans. "What do you want, Jessica?" She hesitated. I don't even know why I called. I sighed. "Then why did you?" A pause. Then, so soft I almost didn't hear it, because I have no one else to call. I frowned. "Not my problem." She let out a breathy, humorless laugh. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." Silence stretched between us. I didn't rush to fill it. Eventually, she spoke again. "Tyler and it didn't work out." I wasn't surprised. Shocking. She ignored the sarcasm. "Ashley left him. Took the baby, moved in with her parents. I guess he thought that meant we'd be together, but as soon as his life got hard, he bailed. Again, not my problem." "I know," she whispered, "but I don't have a job, Matt. I don't have anything. I lost everything, and She trailed off, her voice breaking. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes. I could almost picture her, sitting in some small, overpriced apartment, looking around at the mess she had made, realizing too late that she had bet on the wrong man. For a second, I felt a twinge of pity. Then I remembered every time she had laughed at me in front of her friends. Every night she came home late, smelling like someone else's cologne. Every lie. I opened my eyes, my voice steady. "Jessica, you did this to yourself." She sniffed. "I know. You had everything. A home. A husband who would have done anything for you. And you threw it away for a cheap affair with a man who never planned on sticking around." She let out a quiet sob. I just wanted more." I laughed, shaking my head. "And now you have nothing." Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "Yeah, I didn't feel bad for her. Not even a little." "You called the wrong person Jessica," I said, pushing off the railing. I moved on. "You should too." She inhaled sharply, like she wanted to say something else. Maybe beg, maybe apologize. But I didn't give her the chance. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. I had no reason to look back. Jessica was living in the ruins of the life she had destroyed, and I was finally free. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.